Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today we continue with our mini-series on the topic of service. In the last two discussions, if you recall, we discussed how material welfare service isn't necessarily devotional or spiritual service, as the nature of the service itself, whether it degrades or uplifts our and others' consciousness, as well as our own motive for performing it. These ingredients factor in when considering what falls into the category of devotional service. However, we also noted that the material and spiritual upliftment of other living entities can often be accomplished at the same time. Here's a picture of Srila Prabhupada with some of his disciples and others who are listening in. Well, one time Srila Prabhupada was staying in Mayapur, in Bengal, India, where he had established the headquarters of his movement. And one of his disciples, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, recounts how one day the devotees, the Bhakti Yogis, put on a big feast, all vegetarian of course, and they invited all the local villagers to attend. After the feast was over, all the banana leaf plates that they would serve the prasadam meals on were thrown behind the temple. The use of leaf plates is an organic way to eat food in many places in India because the plates just break down, since they're organic matter. And after the meal, Srila Prabhupada went back upstairs to the room where he was staying. Suddenly, he and the others in his room at the time heard a dog barking somewhere in the back of the temple outside. Srila Prabhupada got up and walked out to the veranda, looked down, and he saw the big pile of banana leaf plates, and right near that pile were some very poor young children with torn clothes and sticks in their hands, and they were frightening away some dogs so that they could get the remnants of food that people had left behind on their plates. When Srila Prabhupada saw how these children had to fight off the dogs to eat throwaway food, he started to cry. He commented, "How hungry they must be." Then he said, "We have to see that nobody goes hungry within a 10-mile radius of our temples." And he continued, "The temple is the house of God. God is everyone's father. Krishna is everyone's father. In the presence of the Father, the Son doesn't go hungry. So we have to make an arrangement that people get fed." Jayapataka Swami concludes the story by mentioning that this is when the Bhakti Yogis, those in Srila Prabhupada's movement, organized ISKCON Food Relief, which later became Food for Life. And in Mayapur, they began distributing 7 days a week to anyone and everyone prasadam, freshly cooked food offered to the Lord. And then other temples that Srila Prabhupada had started around the world also started prasadam food distribution programs. And of course, prasadam, because it has been sanctified by being first offered to the Supreme, elevates the consciousness of those who come into contact with it. Now, Srila Prabhupada also allowed people shelter at temples if they were willing to do some service, which was in their best interest anyway. After all, he noted, without food and shelter, how can people focus on higher topics of spirituality? So, while Srila Prabhupada's main purpose was spiritual education, one of the ways in which this spiritual education is accomplished is often through other spiritual welfare activities. When we distribute prasadam, for instance, the prasadam food elevates the consciousness of the people, and it also draws people to Bhakti Yoga centers and temples time and time again, and over time they start learning more about Bhakti Yoga. Prasadam distribution is often the beginning of people's spiritual life. After the earthquakes in Turkey last year, and after the Russia-Ukraine war started, the devotees in ISKCON started up prasadam food distribution programs and disaster relief efforts to help people in these locations. And the power of these prasadam outreach and relief efforts during disasters is that they help people to get the basic necessities of life while bringing them into contact with spiritually minded people, with those on the path of bhakti. Everyone is elevated spiritually and materially helped through these interactions. Now, our bhakti lineage has a very rich history. Srila Prabhupada's own spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, was known to give to the poor people gathered around the temples that he visited, and he would correct his disciples if they displayed indifference toward the plight of others. He's pictured on the slideshow right now. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, wrote in his book, Tattva Viveka, "Those who think that devotion to Krishna and kindness to the jivas, souls, are mutually different from each other and perform accordingly in their life, such persons will not be able to follow the devotional culture. Their performances are only a semblance of devotion. Therefore, all the types of beneficence to others, like kindness, friendliness, forgiveness, charity, respect, etc., are included in bhakti." Again, the spiritual path of Bhakti Yoga is holistic and comprehensive. Bhakti Yoga is not all about saving ourselves. It's also about helping others put a permanent end to their material problems by empowering them spiritually. Krishna's proposed path of Bhakti Yoga, with its many ways of carrying out spiritual welfare activities, is perfect, such that most of the time, both spiritual upliftment and taking care of the material body can be accomplished at the same time. And on that note, now we will show you some of the spiritual welfare services that ISKCON and different Bhakti Yoga communities around the world are carrying out. Of course, this list is not exhaustive, but is meant to display a sampling. There is the ISKCON Relief Program, and on their website they mention, "At ISKCON Relief, we provide the basic necessities of life, from water, food, education, healthcare, psychological and trauma support, and temporary shelter in the event of a crisis." Then there is ISKCON Relief Prasadam distribution, which involves providing nutritious, healthy meals during periods of crisis, all vegetarian, of course. Then there's also the well-known Food for Life. On their website, they have that Food for Life is the world's largest vegetarian food distribution program, serving millions of meals daily with projects in over 60 countries. Currently, Food for Life's largest programs are in India. More than 1.2 million school children are served multi-course, hot, healthy, and tasty lunch 6 days a week in cities throughout the subcontinent, through a partnership with the Indian government for the midday meal scheme. Education administrators have stated that the ISKCON Food for Life program, locally known as Anamrita, actually facilitates many poor children to attend school. Otherwise, they explain, without the program, the children would be forced to work as child laborers to earn enough to eat for the day. So this program is pretty powerful and impactful in these children's lives. And then it's mentioned that Food for Life volunteers also respond to natural disasters, bringing food and hope into the lives of people affected by events such as the wars in Bosnia and Chechnya, the Indian Ocean tsunami, the Typhoon Haiyan, and Hurricane Katrina. And then there's also a Prasadam distribution program in New York City and other major cities in the US and around the world. And these are meant for the homeless and anyone else who wants or needs a hot Prasadam meal. There are also efforts in regards to children's education. There is the Sandipani Muni School for underprivileged and orphaned children in Vrindavan, which is a sacred village in Uttar Pradesh in North India. And there are also Bhakti Yogi Gurukuls, schools that children can attend for spiritual education in different places around the world. There is the Care for Cows program, also in Vrindavan. On their website, they state that at present we maintain over 500 abandoned cows, bulls, retired oxen, and orphaned calves throughout the sacred precincts of Vrindavan, India. There are also a number of Adopt a Cow programs at different temples with sustainable farm communities in the US and elsewhere in the world. There are programs for widow support in Vrindavan. And there are many sustainability projects, managed by Bhakti Yogis, including the expansive Govardhan Eco Village near Mumbai, the New Vrindavan Farm Community in West Virginia, the Gita Nagari Eco Farm in Pennsylvania, the Bhakti Devi Farm in Alachua, Florida, and New Talavan in Mississippi, among others. Of course, these are just a sampling of the welfare projects that Bhakti Yogis in different parts of the world carry out. And the point of showing these different projects is to show that while we are spiritual beings, we do not turn a blind eye to the fact that we're in material bodies, and so is everyone else. Our material bodies are actually our sadhana sharira, our vehicles for performing our spiritual practices. So they are an important part of our sadhana. So for those who feel a calling to serve Krishna, to serve the Supreme Lord, through activities like the ones mentioned on the 2 slides just shown, there is the space to engage in such activities. Some people are very much inclined toward this type of welfare work, and they want to be out doing these projects. And so in the devotional bhakti community, there is of course scope for carrying out such services. The key point to remember is that our consciousness makes the difference between an action being material and spiritual. To be spiritual, our activities must be offered to Krishna, and of course the activity itself must elevate and not degrade those involved. Welfare work isn't necessarily spiritual. It's still good from a material vantage point and necessary, but it becomes spiritual only when we add in Krishna, when we offer the results of these activities and any of our activities to Krishna. So now, on that note, what about me? What about you? How can we provide permanent spiritual aid to others? Well, when we start taking up Bhakti Yoga, it's helpful to first remember that service, devotional service, is every activity we do in life if we offer it to Krishna. Granted, the proposed activity must not be one that falls into the category of the mode of ignorance, say, which lowers our consciousness and often others as well. Still, almost everything in our lives can be offered to Krishna. And in this way, our whole life can be devotional service to the Supreme. And in Bhakti Yoga, it's actually advantageous for us to start with ourselves and then shift to helping others. This means that when we first develop a solid spiritual practice ourselves, which steadies our own consciousness spiritually, then we're better leveraged to help others spiritually. This is akin to putting our oxygen mask on before putting others on for them. So if you haven't yet, please do consider chanting the Maha Mantra on your own. Just decide on the number of rounds you wish to chant daily and try to stick to that predetermined number. Try also offering to Krishna your vegetarian food items. Try offering your other daily activities, including your job and career work, taking care of your home, yard, and families, etc. All of these take on enhanced meaning even when we do this, when we offer them to Krishna. And maybe try developing an easy-to-sustain reading practice, even if it's a small amount, from the Bhagavad Gita every day or another book. You can ask us for recommendations. These items listed on screen are all devotional service. They're all considered service to the Supreme. Now, when you do feel like your own practice is sustainable, you can think about what devotional outreach services resonate with you and be thinking, in what way do I want to contribute to people's spiritual upliftment? Some people like to go door to door in their neighborhood or elsewhere and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. Others like to invite friends or neighbors over and discuss with them in a more personal and intimate setting about Bhakti Yoga. Some like to sing the Maha Mantra at public kirtan events. Some like to give classes on topics in Bhakti Yoga. Some like to prepare and cook vegetarian meals, offer them to Krishna, and then distribute the prasadam meals to others. Some like to go to places where natural disasters have struck and help the people there by handing out prasadam and offering people shelter. This is a very individual topic because spiritual life is personal. We are persons. individual, unique persons. And we have Krishna-given personal inclinations and talents for a reason. We're meant to use them in service. That's the perfection of our individual talents. We've mentioned it before, but there are 9 processes of Bhakti Yoga. We'll have a class on them eventually. And within those 9 processes, there are many different ways to serve Krishna. As we practice Bhakti Yoga, we'll uncover the service that fulfills us. We'll naturally feel drawn to a certain service or multiple services. Krishna will guide us from within in this regard once we start taking up the practice of Bhakti Yoga, beginning with chanting the Maha Mantra. Everyone is a unique individual with different ideas for how they wish to serve in various capacities. Importantly, none of the services listed before is larger or smaller than the other because service is transcendental. It transcends material measurements. It's spiritual and it's valued all the same. Devotional service is devotional service. Now, next, we're going to present a little checklist that serves as a helpful reminder for actually any activity we wish to do. This is how to approach any activity from the spiritual perspective to assess whether or not it is spiritually beneficial for us and others to engage in any single activity. The checklist starts first. What is my consciousness and approach to the activity? Is it uplifting my consciousness or distracting me from my spiritual life? The next one, am I connecting the activity to Krishna via offering the results of it to him? Am I doing work, activities that are outside of my nature or preventing me from carrying out the duties I have to do in life? In other words, am I over-endeavoring? Now, the principle of yukta vairagya, or dovetailing our lives spiritually, indicates right or proper endeavor and renunciation in spiritual life. This means that if an activity we are trying to engage in makes us feel like we are really over-endeavoring, and if that activity is just exhausting for us to perform, or not leaving us enough time, say, to attend to our personal sadhana, like chanting our japa, or to our daily obligations, then it's a sign that that particular activity is not for us, even if the activity is a nice one and could be offered to Krishna, or if someone else could do it. If we find ourselves over-endeavoring for something, then it's not for us. I like to think of the analogy of laying across the table to reach the salt. That's over-endeavoring. Better to stick to what we can easily reach across for. Such activities that feel natural to us tend to be the ones harmonious with our nature. And that's not to say to not put in the requisite effort into our activities. We offer our best to Krishna. But this just refers to over-endeavor, where it's taking up all our time and energy, and we're just depleted at the end of the day. That's over-endeavor. The next question to ask ourselves is the association, the other people for the activity I am engaging in, are they uplifting or degrading my consciousness? How will this association affect my consciousness? And finally, is there a way to elevate the consciousness of others through this activity? For example, we could bring to our workplace prasadam cookies. We can offer to Krishna the water in the 5-gallon container at our place of work so that it is prasadam and then everyone is benefited. We can distribute Srila Prabhupada's books to our neighbors and friends, knowing that the spiritual knowledge contained within them will help them to thrive in all aspects of their lives. Now, note that much or all of this checklist can also apply to the career or work we choose to engage in this life. It's beneficial for us to ask ourselves the above questions often, actually, to gauge if our actions are helping us to spiritually advance, in addition to materially advance. So we'll leave off on the note of these checklists. Let us know what you think of them, and perhaps try to use them this week. If you do, let us know how it goes for you. Till then, we'll be coming up with our next topic to cover here on Bhakti Fundamentals. so check in with us next week for the next video. In the meantime, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.